our coverage of the coronavirus outbreak. We're focused on answering your questions, and one of the big questions, when can I get outdoors, especially with this beautiful weather? Well, starting today in Washington State, it got a little easier. Fishing, hunting, and yes, golf are back on with social distancing in mind. But what about state parks, which are open? Tim Gordon got the answer.
Okay, the good news is most state parks in Washington are open as of today, but there are some that are not. Here's the deal. State parks are still closed on the Washington coast and in the Columbia River Gorge. The state feels smaller communities in those places are more at risk of visitors coming into their area. But we're supposed to stay close to home anyway, and close to many of us is the Columbia River. People got out for some fishing from the Washington side today, a first this season. And close to me is Battleground Lake State Park, so we checked that out on its opening day. I'm pleased to say it was not overcrowded. People were practicing social distancing as they enjoyed it out there. State Parks leaders say there aren't enough rangers to enforce health safety rules, so people really need to be responsible for themselves. Overcrowded parks will be shut down if necessary. So let's all follow the rules, keep this thing going in the right direction, and get more of our state open up.
All right, thank you, Tim. What about Oregon parks? Well, some state parks and outdoor recreation areas are reopening tomorrow. This is a gradual reopening. It's not all happening at once. So popular places like the Gorge and the coast, they're still closed. The governor's office also says she will issue an executive order that will allow ski resorts to start operating again. Definitely you want to check what's open before you go and be aware that bathrooms and other services might not open. And they also say you should avoid crowds and wear a mask. You know, as parks and businesses slowly start to reopen, there are a lot of questions about just how our new normal will work, especially when returning to work. Joining me tonight is Portland attorney Joseph Haddad to answer your unemployment and workplace questions. So, Joseph, we have a lot of great questions from viewers. One, I think that the most common question, what happens to your unemployment check in Oregon and Washington if your workplace reopens, but you don't feel safe returning?
That's a really common question, Kristen. The real standard isn't just whether you feel safe returning, but whether you are safe in returning. Your employer needs to be following both governmental and public safety guidelines in order to facilitate a safe return to work. Provided that happens, an employee is obligated to return to work or to accept at least some suitable work that will allow them to continue to receive income. By failing to return to work, if the workplace is in fact safe, the employment department will probably deem that to have rejected, or the employee to have rejected suitable work, and very well disqualify the employee from receiving any further unemployment benefits.
Okay, that brings us to our next question. So let's say you had a job and you were laid off and collecting unemployment because of COVID-19. So let's say your employer offers you a chance to return to work, but for part-time or for far less hours. What happens to your unemployment check? Do you lose it? And if so, any options for those people?
Well, you will lose it if you reject the offer to return to work. The difference usually will be in the amount of pay that you would have typically received prior to there being an actual reduction in force or the layoff or any interruption in employment. And so while there is still not going to be the full income that an employee would have received normally, those part-time hours, whether it's a flex schedule or just reduced schedule, will supplement any additional employment benefits. The unemployment itself will be reduced to match the actual income that the employee is receiving. But it is important for the employees to go ahead and accept those offers, because an employer has an obligation to notify an employment department and the employment department that suitable work was available and that the employee refused.
Got it. So if work is offered to you, you basically have to accept it.
Yes, I mean, I think with certain limits. Now, that again, I think is based on the presumption that the workplace itself is safe. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us are, especially those who are working in, I think, specific industries that are going to come into contact with the public, are going to have those safety concerns concerns themselves no matter what the employer does. But if the employer is objectively taking those necessary precautions, that employee should return to work. Otherwise, their unemployment is still going to, it's going to run out, and the employment department will disqualify them from further benefits.
And we've had so many questions, about just safety. So if you do return to work and your employer, takes steps to keep you safe, but it's just not enough, you just don't feel safe, what are your options?
Well, of course, one of your options is to not go to work. I think it's important for an employee to engage in dialogue with the employer, to talk to the employer about what can be done to facilitate a safe return to work. And if the employer is, I think, at least refusing to take those necessary steps, or just is not following proper CDC guidelines or governmental safeguards and policy in order to create a safe workplace, then an employee does have OSHA and the complaint processes available in order to report unsafe working conditions. Naturally, you would hope that there is enough of a dialogue there in order for an employer and employee to be able to accommodate a safe working environment, but that just simply isn't going to be the case always, and an employee who truly feels those guidelines are not being followed should contact OSHA.
Is there a high threshold? I mean, would an employee who is filing a complaint, if they don't feel safe, do they have to prove a certain number of things, for action to be taken?
No. In fact, the employee doesn't have to prove anything. It's the employer that has to establish what they are doing within the workplace in order to make their people, their vendors, their clients, the public safe. And those guidelines are incredibly important. It's why I think you're starting to see employers take a lot of real new measures to allow everyone, including their employees, the ability to feel comfortable in the workplace. And I think that will certainly beg the question as to how many people actually need to be in the workplace to work at all, and whether teleworking is still going to be a suitable model, Kristen.
And Joseph, we had a viewer question. They wanted to know, so if you tested positive for COVID-19, can you share that with fellow employees, or could you get in trouble for disclosing that?
Oh, I sure hope not. The medical information relating to employees is certainly confidential. Employers are and should be held to a strict duty to maintain confidentiality that relates to their employees. But if you're an employee, you have that right to be able to disclose your information. And in many ways, I think we should applaud those people who are open about what is, I think, their true medical condition, to determine not only, I think, sufficient contact tracing, but exposure not only to their employees, but to the workplace, to their friends, and to others, to the extent that there has been interactions with someone who has tested COVID-19 positive. Employer retribution for doing so, I think, is certainly unwarranted, and really does raise a question of whether disciplining an employee for disclosing their COVID-19 testing, or whether they are positive, it really does raise a question of whether that discipline is lawful.
All right, Joseph, thank you so much for your time and for all of just that great information. I know so many people are in this situation right now.
Thank you so much, Kristen.
And at any time, you can send in your questions. There's a new number to text us. It's 503-226-5088. If we don't get to your question tonight, we'll be answering your questions right here at 7 o'clock, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday nights. Still ahead, the CDC has expanded the list of coronavirus symptoms. But does that mean more people will get tested? But first, a question so many of you are asking: how can I enroll in Oregon's coronavirus monitoring study? So the answer: OHSU is sending invitations to a random selection of people. You can only sign up if you get one of those in the mail. And welcome back. The CDC has expanded the list of symptoms for COVID-19. They include fever, cough, shortness of breath, chills, repeated shaking with chills, muscle pain, headache, sore throat, and new loss of taste or smell. But does the expanded list mean more people will get tested? Here's Dr. John Torres.
Part of the reason they expanded this is exactly for that, to try and qualify more people to get tested, but also partly because we have found out over the last couple of months that people are having these symptoms either along with all the other ones or even in isolation, and then they end up testing positive for coronavirus. Now, all along we've been talking about the three main ones: cough, fever, and shortness of breath, but now they've added 6 more symptoms, and they're talking chills, repeated chills with shaking, which is something in medicalese we call rigors, muscle pain, headaches, sore throat, and then loss of taste or smell. And again, even in isolation, they're saying this might be coronavirus. So if you do notice any of these symptoms, number one, isolate yourself, but it also hopefully will get you tested, because up until now, testing has mostly been reserved for people with symptoms of coronavirus. Now that we've expanded that, hopefully more people get tested, and we have a better understanding of how it's spreading through the communities. The main point here being that we're learning more as the months go on, and part of that learning process is understanding what the symptoms are.
All right, let's go to a claim now popping up on social media. It says the CDC, it states that the CDC all of a sudden lowered the COVID-19 death count by nearly 30,000 people. Is that true? We had our verified team check it out. Here's Jason Puckett.
Multiple claims say the CDC lowered the number of COVID-19 deaths from 55,000 down to about 37,000 deaths. They all link directly to the CDC website as proof. So is this true? Our main source here, the same CDC pages being shared. As of Monday, the CDC shows 67,456 deaths from COVID-19. But a separate CDC page shows a total of 38,576 COVID-19 deaths. So 2 CDC pages with a difference of 30,000 deaths. What's going on here? Did the CDC change their numbers, or is one of these numbers wrong? No. The numbers on both pages are accurate. One is just a few weeks behind the other. The same page being shared in the viral claims explains the difference. This 67,000 number is the total reported to the CDC by states. Each state counts their death certificates and sends a report on COVID deaths to the CDC. But this smaller number comes from a second check of the death certificates that states send to the National Center for Health Statistics, or NCHS. And here's the key point. Since they have to get these certificates from each state and then process them again, their data, quote, often track 1 to 2 weeks behind other data. And that matches up. CDC archives from about 2 weeks ago show about 39,000 deaths reported by states. So we can verify these claims are false. The CDC didn't lower or revise the COVID death count. They have 2 separate counts. One is a direct current report from states. The other is a second count of death certificates that's a few weeks behind. If you're seeing more claims like this out there, send us an email.
So how are business owners feeling as we begin another month of dealing with the coronavirus? Pat Doris has the results of a new survey.
The National Federation of Independent Business is a nationwide collection of small business owners, about 300,000 of them, and there's a good number right here in Oregon. They recently took a survey of their members to see how things are going out there, and they found that 77% had applied and received the Payment Protection Program, the PPP, from the federal government. It means that if you get that loan and you spend 75% on your payroll, you don't have to pay it back, so it's pretty popular. They also found that of those that had applied and received authorization, 61% already have money in the bank from that program, so that's very encouraging. They also found that 46% of those businesses are ready to open up right now. Let's get the doors open, they're saying. But at the same time, that means that 54% are saying, well, we could wait a month, or we could wait till the health people say it's okay. They also found that 43% are worried about getting their customers back in the door, but that also means that 57% are only sort of worried, or maybe not all that much. Finally, 38% are concerned about having enough hand sanitizer on site when they finally do bring the employees and the customers back in. But that's a whole lot that are not all that worried about it. So, it's just a moment in time, just a snapshot, but it gives us a pretty good idea of what small business owners across the country and right here in Oregon are thinking about in the middle of this pandemic.
Pat, really good information. And still ahead, how can you help your child have an easier time during this stay home, stay safe order? But first, you wanted to know, how long does it take to get coronavirus test results? The answer, according to the Oregon Health Authority, results are generally available within 3 to 4 days.
Subscribe and listen wherever you find podcasts. From politicians to patients, a lot of people are looking for a magic bullet to kill coronavirus. And while that may be a lot harder than it sounds, some doctors report a very simple treatment is helping ease symptoms in COVID-19 patients: rolling them over. Let's connect the dots. It's called proning, and it means putting a patient in a prone position, lying flat on their stomach instead of lying on their back. It requires little to no equipment, but it appears to help patients critically ill with coronavirus. So why does it work? It's a matter of basic anatomy. As we've learned, COVID-19 can attack the lungs, and the human body has more lung tissue in the back than the front. So when fluid builds up in the lungs and you are lying on your back, more lung tissue is affected, interfering with lung function. The treatment has been used effectively for years to help patients with acute respiratory distress syndrome, which is also a life-threatening complication seen in many severe coronavirus patients. More research needs to be done on proning and coronavirus, but doctors report it reduces the need for patients to be put on ventilators.
And finally tonight, it's too soon to know the long-term impact growing up in the coronavirus era will have on children. So what can parents do to make this time just a little easier on their kids? Reporter Cole Sullivan got some tips.
How many of you are worried someone in your family might get sick? All of them raised their hands.
Yeah.
Licensed therapist Amanda Gillum.
We want to try to combat that with telling kids what they have in their life that's keeping them safe.
Here's what you can do as a parent to help your child feel safer. Gillum says, watch how you act. It impacts how kids feel.
It's important for us adults to, have our own anxieties kind of in check.
But do not hide reality.
If kids are asking questions, they're ready for answers.
Childhood development experts say children are resilient and most will be just fine. But kids in already disadvantaged situations may struggle more, especially with the sting of the virus's economic punch. How can a parent losing a job impact a kid's psychology?
It can really increase a lot of stress in a kid if the parents are modeling that for the kid.
She says focus on what kids can control. As simple as washing their hands will help. And help create a routine for your child.
Kids thrive on routine for sure, and so this is really, knocking a lot of them out of sorts and making them feel less in control of their lives.
And she says, focus on hope. The kids we talk to, they already know that.
I think that our main thing is we just need to stay strong and brave and positive and have a positive mindset. We're all going to get through this and it's all going to be over.
Yes, very wise words. Kids always have such great insight. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. KGW is committed to continuing coverage on the coronavirus outbreak. If you still have questions, our past stories may answer them for you. Go to kgw.com/answers.